Welcome to the Infill Podcast, where we interview the most interesting members of the 3D printing and maker communities, live and with audience participation. And now, here is your host, Jonathan Levy.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the messiest background podcast on the internet. I'm super excited to have you all here today, and I'm even more excited for our guest. Some of you may have heard of MatterHackers. In fact, if you haven't, you'd be in the minority because they are the largest independent 3D printing retailer in North America, and I think in the world. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of interviewing their co-founder and CEO, Mr. Lars Brubaker. But before I bring him in, he has a very interesting past. He used to be a game developer. He sold a business to Amazon before this, and he's been with MatterHackers since the very beginning, which is now going on 12 years. Lars, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Jonathan. Excited to be here.
I am as well. So as we were chatting before we kind of went live, I learned that you were a developer and also one of your other co-founders. So you guys were software developers. You were a game developer. You sold a business to Amazon. How does someone go from that, that really wonderful kind of using your education to getting into retailing 3D printers and this kind of, at the time, 12 years ago, consumer 3D printers? That was a niche, geeky little hobby. So I'm curious about that.
So just to do a quick background so that it has some context. Before MatterHackers, I had a company called Reflexive Entertainment, and I was the CEO and a lead programmer at that company. We had that company for 11 years. We made lots of games, and we also made a game distribution platform, which is relevant because it gave us that context to work with a whole lot of other external developers, external parties, and be selling first party. So we were actually selling our own games and selling other people's games. And then Amazon was looking for essentially to expand their own distribution, and they bought Reflexive for the distribution platform that we had built. So I worked for them for 3 years. But during that time, I was really into the RepRap movement, so the open source 3D printing movement. And I was following the machines, and then I saw the MakerBots come out, the early Cupcake, and I told my wife, I think this is really cool. I think this is something I want to do. So she bought me a MakerBot, a Cupcake for Christmas. I put that machine together. It started printing. I used the software, and I just looked at it and said, I could do something here. Like I could improve this. I wanted to actually build 3D printers. I wanted to write the software. And we did. When MatterHackers originally started, we were writing software. We wrote Matter Control and Matter Slice. So those actually controlled 3D printers. We did do our own 3D printer for a while, which is Pulse. We still sell that a little bit, but mostly that was kind of a pathfinding platform to do advanced materials. So when carbon fiber nylon originally came out, we were the very first people to make it. Really? It wasn't available on any machine, and you couldn't buy a machine that didn't need to be modified in order to print it. So we shipped a machine, a bed slinger, that could 3D print carbon fiber nylon out of the box.
No kidding.
And that ran our software as well. So I was the lead developer on that software. And so, our 3D printing adventures got started with RepRap and got started with the idea that we could do something innovative in RepRap. And then early on, the opportunity that created the MatterHackers that we have today was that MakerBot couldn't supply their filament quickly enough. And so they were about 3 months behind in filament supplies. And so we started trying to source filament as just an opportunity in the marketplace.
Okay, that's that was the piece that I was missing, because I was like, okay, you're a developer. You could build and engineer and all this stuff. Like, how do you go into this underdeveloped geeky hobby? But the answer is you guys actually started out as building 3D printers. Tell me about that moment, right? Because at the time, today, Amazon sells filament. I can get filament literally down the street, and I live in Israel. So it's crazy.
Yep.
But back then, most plastics factories were like, you want what? We have pellets.
Oh, God, yes. There were only a couple companies in the world that were spooling filament for 3D printing. Wow. And they were weed whacker lines that converted over, or they were often carpet companies. So they were making 3D plastic, and they were spooling plastic on those spools or similar spools for other means, but they weren't doing it for 3D printing.
Oh my gosh.
And so we had an incredibly difficult time finding people who could make materials that were good.
I bet.
I mean, we had dozens and dozens and dozens of samples come in PLA and ABS, and we didn't sell ABS for almost a year because we couldn't find a supplier that would make ABS that was printable.
No
So we
kidding.
started out selling PLA. I'm pretty sure we started, yeah, and didn't move on to any other materials for quite a while. And even then, PLA was not what it is today. It would crack all the time. If you left it out overnight, it would just shatter whatever wasn't in the same form as the original cast onto that spool. So, and like I said in my bio to you, that I did all the jobs. And for the first couple of years, or at least the first year, I was customer service. So I had to answer that call for everybody and just say, people would ask me, how do I get this printing and how do I do things? And famously, I had this call. I was on the phone for 45 minutes with this guy.
Mhm.
And we used to say, hit it with some try. So, or can I Google that for you? And so I'd be on this phone trying to help this guy, and I don't know what his printer is, and I've never had one, and I don't really know what the problem is or what his bed surface is or any of these things. And I'm just trying for 45 minutes. And at this end of the 45 minutes, I said to him, is there anything else I can help you with? And he said, well, you haven't helped me with anything yet.
Oh my gosh.
And
And it's just because
like,
the filament was that junk and the printers were that
the
junk.
printers were really, his problem was he just didn't know how to print.
You just made me feel better because in 2011 I sold a business, and you've sold a business, so you're like, okay, now I'm gonna get into a new hobby, like have fun for a while before going back. And I was like, this was also, I think we're talking about 2011, right? So at the time
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna buy a 3D printer and get it. And I feel like if I'd gotten into it then, unlike you, I probably would have run for the hills and never come back.
Yeah, it was. We would go to conferences and people would just ask, "Where is zero?" So they'd be asking, like, as I'm setting up my printer and I'm trying to print, and I'm trying to find out where zero is when you move the nozzle down towards the bed in order to get that first layer to go. One of the biggest questions at the conference would just simply be, "Where is zero? Where should the nozzle be so that my material might stick to the bed and I can actually succeed at printing?"
Wow.
And now printers are all self-calibrating, so this isn't something that anyone would even consider. But it was a big deal to understand how do you just say go? When do you push the button that starts the print?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you come into this and filament is the first kind of foray where you go, wait a minute, we could probably retail. I imagine you go about trying to find plastic factories and source your own filament. I think today, again, I'm going to apologize for my ignorance because I live in Israel, so I don't know. I only recently figured out what what's it called? Postmates is, right? Like we don't have all
Yeah.
this stuff here. So I don't know too much about actually MatterHackers business, and that's one of the things that I want to learn. I think today people know you as retailers of all the major reputable brands, but back then you were
Mhm.
kind of doing your own brands.
Right. And we still do our own first party filament. So that's
Mm-hmm.
actually the biggest part of our materials business is our own filament.
Okay.
So we have 3 different lines, and then we have a bunch of specialty or high end filaments. So we have MH Build, which is you can buy it in bulk. It's our really kind of that blend between premium and a good price,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you buy it in quantity. And then we have our Pro Series materials, which are more expensive. They're all US made, and they kind of conform to some standards that some people need in this country. So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, military really likes to buy US manufactured
Yep.
products. And so that's a great material for us to provide for them. And then we just came out with a new line called Thrifty Make, which really is just designed to be as cheap as possible and kind of compete with these new entries that are coming in at very low budgets, sold on eBay or other kinds of third-party sites where things get really cheap.
That is super interesting. I told you before the interview, if there's anything you don't want to answer because it's a business secret, I'm just curious. Have you guys taken some of that filament manufacturing in-house, or you're contracting and finding local businesses in the US?
So we still contract all of that material production, but we have like our own internal testing. So we have like melt flow indexing and like other testing machines here. And so we bring all that back and we do color calibration and testing and make sure that everything is conformant. And we have a contract with all of these manufacturers that ensure that they are providing at the level that we need.
That is interesting.
But yeah, we contract out all of the manufacturing and all over the world. So, in
Right.
Italy and Germany and
Right, because you
in
guys
the
also have a
Netherlands,
large
America.
business of MatterHackers Europe. This isn't just North America.
We only sell in North America. We
Ah,
did sell more internationally at one point, but the economics of it were just too challenging. So
okay.
we really kind of pulled ourselves back to just be North America.
Okay. Okay. All right, cool. Shows again my knowledge of all
Yeah.
the major retailers. How many kilos of filament are going out the door at MatterHackers every month?
Oh my goodness. I do not know the number anymore. Thousands. So
Thousands and
yeah,
thousands of kilos. And
yes,
and
we get 10 trucks a month. So entire container fulls of filament.
amazing. And I ask
So
this because I did in my past life, also did retailing, e-commerce retailing for hobby business, which was luxury car parts, car upgrades. So I'm very curious. Do you guys have warehouses throughout the country, or where are you guys located?
So we have one large warehouse in Southern California, which is
Mhm.
our headquarters, and then we have another warehouse in Pennsylvania.
Got it. Very
So, and
cool.
both of those are right around 20,000 square feet. So, pretty big warehouse
Wow.
full of printers and material.
Wow. And how many people work at
And
MatterHackers now?
I think that we're just about 70 with all of the companies that we own.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So,
Okay.
which is both tiny and huge, depending on, what morning and, what side of the bed you wake up on. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I just feel like we have so many people, and sometimes I think we're nothing, like we barely exist. You can put them all in one building. So what is that?
Right. In the
Yeah.
era of Amazon, you know,
Uh-huh.
like what
Yeah.
is a 70 person e-commerce retailer? Bernard Taylor says in the chat, the loyalty program is why MH is my go-to for 3D printer filament and accessories. That's cool.
Yep. So we have a 3% rewards program on anything that you purchase with MatterHackers.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, great. We have some really great customers. I mean, people have been with us for a decade now,
Wow.
and they just buy and buy and buy. And the thing is, if you've done customer service, which I've been on the front line, and I also am still very involved in understanding what our customer service department is trying to go through, it can be very, very difficult to have to understand and know that some people are getting a bad experience
Mm,
because you're so desperately interested in providing a great experience. And 99% of the time we do. But for me, and I think for our customer service department, that 0.5% or whatever it is that we really fail to satisfy is just such a thorn. It's such
yep.
you take that home with you. You really want to provide great support, great service, great sales across the board.
Yeah. And,
And so I really appreciate that guy saying that he loves our rewards program. We love that.
yeah. And it's, the squeaky wheel kind of syndrome where it's that one person, their comments are 1,000 times louder than 10,000 people
Oh yeah.
having a fantastic experience who don't say anything. They maybe say to their wife, wow, that came really fast, or gosh, this filament is so good. But,
And we get enough of that to really offset it, because a
yeah,
lot of people strangely and wonderfully do write into us to tell us
good.
how much they appreciate our sales, how much they appreciate a particular support agent, how much they appreciate our materials or the printers that they're working with. And specifically our support people really do a great job. I've had a lot of
Awesome.
people, like from schools. My daughter's school actually had a problem years ago, and just randomly, I was talking to the principal of that school, and she wanted to pull me aside and say how incredible it was when she called us up and how much we helped,
That's
which was great because
awesome.
I wasn't aware of it at all. You know?
That's awesome. So we
Yeah.
jumped in time a little bit, but I want to bring us back. So you start the filament business is this opportunity. Walk me through the evolution, because 11 years is a long time, and to go from that to like, I don't think there's any major brands that you guys don't carry or haven't worked with. So walk me through the evolution of the business, because I think it's interesting also as the evolution of the hobby, right? In 2011, it was kind
Right.
of like MakerBot, then Prusa comes, and so I'm interested to hear that story through your eyes.
The complexity of any startup is always much deeper than almost anyone gets to hear the story of. So it's
Hmm.
interesting. When we originally started out, we were attempting to build a 3D printer. We wanted to kickstart it. It was going to be a printer and a scanner, all in one combo. And we started moving down that line, but we recognized that we weren't going to be able to conclude that printer before we would have monetary problems. And so we're just looking for short-term opportunities.
Yep.
And for instance, I went on the RepRap forum and I was just looking for things that would make money. And people were talking about row stock parts. They just needed 3D printed parts. Mm-hmm. So we bought the very first Airwolf that was ever sold, which is a little company. They were operating out of Newport Beach, really close to us. And we went over to their garage and brought that printer back and started printing parts that we were then selling on the RepRap forum. But then we're just looking for opportunities. And then we see the MakerBot opportunity to sell filament. And we bring in what to us would just be nothing of filament, probably 60 spools or something, which we sell in 2 hours now. So we bring all that spool in and we're relabeling it and changing it to be MatterHackers filament. And we put up our very first website, which was written by Kevin, my other partner. And we're just doing it. So it's just scrappy. It's just any opportunity that we can find. And we're also pitching, trying to get investment. And it was just all over the place. But the filament kept happening, right? And then we started carrying Airwolf, and then we started carrying CME CNC, another early startup in the US, and we started carrying more and more printers. So ultimately we get MakerBot and we get these additional printers, and our business is starting to transition into being the thing that's actually making money is filament and printer sales, and we're becoming a national reseller. So, and we had a lot of experience with setting up a website, doing credit card transactions, doing security, doing user accounts, and that became the opportunity. So we just moved with the wind, which is what we always try to do, is go where the opportunities lead. And but that said, we did make printer control software that we were licensing to a number of companies. So we were licensing our 3D printing control and ultimately design software out to these early manufacturers, and they were paying us royalties. And then we made this thing called Matter Control Touch, which was an Android tablet that had our software loaded onto it.
Okay.
And we sold several thousand of those, but that ultimately didn't prove to be as effective as just simply selling materials and printers.
Which is really interesting because retailing is typically a pretty hard game. It's pretty difficult.
It's a super hard game.
Especially in the era when I got out of e-commerce. This was before AliExpress and before, before Chinese manufacturers realized that they could just sell directly. And so I'm curious, has this, Bamboo famously now has kind of gone direct to consumer and has done their own warehouses, and yet you guys still have a great relationship with them. So I'm curious how the move towards direct to consumer has affected you guys, if at all, or has it just enhanced what you guys do well?
It's a great question. I think that you always, in every human endeavor, in order to be successful, you have to be operating at a premium level. That's the only way to exist, whether you're doing martial arts or rock climbing or reselling. You have to actually be at kind of that pinnacle of execution. And so for us, where are the optimizations are always the question. How do we move out old, slow-moving inventory? How do we, buy at rates where we can afford the cost of capital to actually get the things that we need? How can we have enough value add that we can get a consumer to buy it from us instead of a reseller? And what are those opportunities? And that's the fight that is being a retailer. I'm sure that it's different now that people can go direct so much easier with the internet. But simultaneously, I don't think life was ever easy when there was competition, which was always.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
I don't think it was easy to be
thinking also of, Prusa acquiring Printed Solid because they want that presence, but also that expertise in customer service and retailing and stuff like that. And I haven't purchased from Printed Solid ever, but people complaining of wait, this was supposed to make this better and that better, and Prusa's working on it, but shipping times are still tough, and it's hard. It's very, very
really
hard. It's the whole Jeff Bezos. Retail customers are always delightfully dissatisfied.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm curious. I have many, many questions today. I would love to know. If we look at a pie chart of your business, how much of it is filament? How much of it is consumer 3D printers? Do you do any? You mentioned, military and not consumer sources that buy
Mm-hmm.
filament from you. So I'm just curious, like, how your business breaks down in terms of the percentages.
We probably, clearly we started with materials. So at one point in time, our business was literally 100% materials and 0% printers or hardware, as we
Yep.
really refer to it, because now we've kind of branched out and we sell, CNC machines and laser cutters and vacuum formers and scanners and all kinds of stuff.
It was very wise to name the business MatterHackers and not, 3D printing emporium.
Yeah. Materials.
Right.
PLA is us or something. But I would say at this point in time, our business probably is about 60% hardware and 40% materials.
Mm-hmm.
Materials have better margins. A lot of the hardware, and particularly because we sell first party materials. And so that allows us to have somewhat better margins. But the margins, the amount of money or the profit that we earn on any transaction has always been really tight. And I think that that's a nature of 3D printing emerging as an e-commerce business on the internet. Like if this business had started somewhere else, it might have actually had, the 50% margins that you would expect in clothing, because you actually have to sell those products through a reseller. But because the business started on the internet, and in fact, with a lot of naive manufacturers who didn't even make enough money to stay in business, let alone provide any revenue for a reseller to participate. So the margins have always been really thin. But that said, the hardware has become a more and more important part of our business over time.
Right. I was shocked, and I won't name names, but I was speaking to one of the premium manufacturers, and I said to them, at the time, I don't want to give incriminating pieces, but at the time I'd basically said, your affiliate program should have this percentage, like that would be fair. I came from online courses, like a 50% affiliate commission is considered fair. But anyway, I said, that you should have, I think what I'd said is you should have a 5% affiliate commission. That seems fair to me, and they go, we don't have a 5% margin. It's like, what? In what? I mean, I'm sure they were factoring in R&D costs and, paying
outbound
the
shipping and
bank
inbound
loans.
shipping.
Exactly. But it's like, you want to tell me on this wildly premium, we're not talking about, an Ender 3 here, on this wildly premium product that is 5%, we don't have 5%. So I can only imagine, and to make that work is not easy at all.
Yeah.
So,
and that's absolutely true for sure. I mean, many of the printers in the marketplace start out with a royalty rate between 10 and 25%, depending on the manufacturer. And we cannot participate at 10%. I mean, if anyone can offer 10%, then that's not a thing that we could sell because it's impossible. I mean, you can't inbound ship it to our warehouse, let alone, send it out to a customer or deal with that customer if they have any issues at all. But it is very common. A lot of these manufacturers, not so much anymore because they've become more savvy, but in the early days, really had no margin for themselves and no margin to share. And it just made it immensely difficult. We just couldn't sell that hardware. And the hardware is still pretty thin.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I don't want to single out China, but the Chinese government has done, depending on how you view it, I would say, sitting here in Israel where we have a thriving tech sector because of this, the government has done a really, really good job investing in tech innovation. And they've gotten the DJIs and the Bamboo Labs and the BYDs. And so a lot of these businesses can afford not to make money. And it's not today, maybe back then it was kind of like not business savvy. Today it's like, no, we raised 25 million. We can afford to sell a few, whatever printers at a loss, or no, we raised $10 billion. We can sell these cars at paper thin margins as part of a wider national strategy, which again, I have no judgment. Tesla got $7 billion from the U.S. government, and the Israeli government, did a really, really good job boosting tech. So, but that doesn't bode well it bodes great for customers. It doesn't bode well for margins of, retailers or affiliates or partners or anything like that.
And it also, I think that China has done a good job of creating the incentives and the the money to build some really interesting companies like Bamboo Labs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the US, those things are much more difficult. That kind of large government funding often goes to established companies,
Yep.
and those companies may or may not be as innovative as some of the people that aren't receiving that funding and don't have an opportunity to participate there.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it can really damage the ability to compete with something like Bamboo Labs. To compete with that in the United States, I don't know what it costs to do that in China. I assume it's many millions of dollars still. But in the United States, to build a machine of that caliber would be $25 million at least.
Right.
Just to do the R&D and the manufacture and get the facility capable of manufacturing it.
Right.
And, it's just very interesting.
I'm going to bite my tongue on how much it may or may not have cost for, Bamboo Lab to develop what they've developed so far, because, yeah, but I definitely agree. And, I think the whole discussion of like things are much more difficult to do in the West is not just a financial decision. As you said, it really is like, this is kind of a tangent, but my wife and I were walking around Shenzhen and we were just in awe of all these big green public spaces. And we're like, why don't we have these in the US? We have like national parks, but in the middle of the city, like massive amounts of space. Israel, way worse. And it's like, oh, right, because here, like, the local government can just say, no, we're taking all this land for parks and daycare centers, and like decisions are very easy. And there are downsides to that, free enterprise being one of them, but there are also major upsides to it as well. I am very curious. You mentioned, before we got on, that Bamboo was a big shakeup in the industry, which I think is not news for anyone. But that you guys were fortunate enough to get ahead of it and work with them, and you sell Bamboo Lab products. I'm very interested to see other shifts that you see coming down the pike, whether it's in materials. One person in the chat, DJ is Pro, asked your opinion on sub $15 PLAs that are now starting to hit the market. Whether it's in materials and machines, every YouTuber has now, except for maybe 2 or 3 of us, has done my predictions for 2024. But you're actually out there negotiating on the next generation of printers that are coming out, and you're also, unlike us YouTubers, you're seeing the sales trends of what's happening in materials, in printers. So I think you have a lot more to say about that than a YouTuber who, all we see is a couple flashy machines here and there a month.
Well, I think the great thing, and this has happened everywhere. Happens in all hardware and software, which is if you see something done, then it can be done, and you attempt to do it. Whereas if you haven't seen it done, then it can be a thing that you're not sure if it's possible to do. So every one of the hardware manufacturers has responded to like the high-speed printing of the Bamboo and the reliability of that first layer and the reliability of completed prints. And so that's just been fantastic. I think that lifts the whole market and will continue to happen. The other, I'm not sure what else you asked as a question in there.
Yeah, but, it was a lot. It was a whole lot. It was kind of just, what do you think the upcoming trends are that we're going to see, particularly, by the way, in materials, because you guys are a filament manufacturer or a filament provider. And I'll do you a solid here because we do need to thank our sponsors. So I'm going to give you a whole 60 to 90 seconds to think about the answer while I really quickly, and you see I've got my swag right here. I'm very on brand. I want to thank PCBWay while we're talking about high quality manufacturing. So, videos. All right, the video's on. So for those of you who don't know, PCBWay is our longest standing sponsor, and they're just phenomenal. They don't just do PCBs. Don't let the name throw you off. They can do injection molding for you. They can do assembly work. I just learned that today. They can do CNC machining. If you want machined titanium, you want sheet metal bent, you want laser cutting, they can do it all. They're kind of like a send, cut, send, but you're paying China prices and you're getting phenomenal customer service. And the cool thing is about it being in China, not only is the manufacturing cost lower, but they actually have trained engineers that are going to look through every single design that you put up. So if you don't know how to design PCBs and this is your first ever attempt at doing so, a literal electronics engineer will look into your design and then tell you if something is wrong with it that wouldn't work. So it's really, really cool. I got a chance to tour their entire facility when I was in Shenzhen, and I was blown away. And one other thing that I am working on, yes, layer by layer, they do metal 3D printing. One other thing that I'm working on is potentially taking the open source precious plastic shredder that's available and all that stuff and uploading it as a project to PCBWay so that anyone can just click order and order all the parts for that shredder. I'm working with them to figure it out if they can supply all the different pieces except the motor. And that might be really, really cool. So thanks to PCBWay. Check the link in the description. And did I give you enough time to think there, Lars?
Sure. Perfect. The thing that this is something I love to say a lot, which is when people ask, what is MatterHackers going to do in the new year? What's going to change about 3D printers? Or I mentioned that I'm super into AI. And my answer is almost always, we're already doing all of the things that we think are really critical. Mm-hmm. Like not just me or just MatterHackers, but everyone. We're already engaged in the things that matter a lot. So if you were to say, what's going to be new about the new iPhone? Mostly it's going to be an iPhone, right? With incremental updates. And so if we were to ask what's going to be new in materials, the interesting thing is the most common materials in 3D printing are still PLA, PETG, ABS, and then we get into the whole range of other materials. And those materials, as injection mold plastics, are very, very old. They're super standard. They're super normal. We now have dozens and dozens of colors. We have additives, things like shiny and other things. But if I were to say what's the most interesting thing to me about 3D printing, it would also reflect back on what's happened in the past, which is when we first got into 3D printing at like a meetup or makerspace or something else was this incredibly important thing that was shelved off by itself. Like it had its own little section and it was 3D printing and it was its own part in the brochure and its own part in the catalog and it's everywhere. And now 3D printing is literally everywhere. It's on every movie set. It's in any YouTuber's pantheon of things that they can use. It's going into every shop and warehouse and various industries everywhere are using it. And that to me is still remains the most exciting and interesting thing is its ubiquity rather than its what's the next specialization. And I think even the innovation that we're seeing across these machines of improved performance, improved reliability, and improved speed make it more ubiquitous rather than more specialized. And that's what I'm the most excited about is to have people say, a 3D printing, well, of course, yeah, I use that at school. What do you mean, did I 3D print something? I've cut something on a saw and I drilled a hole once and I 3D printed a thing because you just do the things that you do. And that's just part of things that you do if you learn about making anything.
And even if you don't own one, you drop down and there's, on every block in a major city, there's like a Kinko's where you can go in and put in your thumb drive or something like that. Definitely. I think, speaking of Bamboo Lab, like Anchor tried to do it, and I don't believe they did a very, very good job with the M5 and then the M5C of like making, I call it, some people got offended about this, so I'll change the terminology. I call it like the printer you buy for your grandma or your grandpa or your kid, your son. People didn't like that I specifically targeted grandmas, but I was like, no, it's someone you buy an octogenarian, for their retirement hobby. But I think
I always like to say a printer that could be in a craft store.
Yeah, there you go. The Michaels crowd.
Yeah.
Like but I think the A1 is that printer.
If you could use a printer as easy as a Cricut, that's a very, very compelling device.
I literally, last time I sat with Dr. Tao in Shenzhen, and I was like, I don't know if you guys know, there's this like machine made by this company in Utah called Cricut. He's like, oh, we know. We know all about Cricut, and they, if you look at it, they basically took that case study with the A1 and A1 Mini. It's like Cricut comes with little swatches of material. The A1 come with swatches of material. Cricut comes with your first projects downloadable. The only thing they didn't copy, or not copy, the only thing they didn't take inspiration from, because I don't think they copied, is Cricut's whole super annoying Cricut Access, whatever, $120 a year subscription model, which I hate. And the fact that, I won't get into all that, but and I think that's because it's 3D printing, and it has this ethos, and they really have done a good job respecting that ethos of like, print whatever you want, make whatever you want,
right?
but I think your insight is very, very good. Do you ever think we get to a point? I mean, you're seeing in the growth of your business, although I imagine it's very hard for you to separate like what is us gaining market share versus what is the market growing. I don't know if you have indications or ways to measure that, but you're seeing like right boots on the ground. Do you think we get to a point where 3D printers are as ubiquitous as 2D printers? I won't say they're on every desk because I can't tell you how many of my friends in the city are like, hey, do you have a printer? Can I come print something? But do you think we
Like
ever
2D
get to
printer.
that point? Exactly. Do you have
Even
a 2D
2D
printer?
printers aren't as ubiquitous as they used to be.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's not nearly the same requirement as there once was. I don't know. I would say my honest opinion is I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the access to them will continue to grow dramatically. And so people's ability to use them at school or at the library or someplace else will continue to evolve. And so lots of people will expect that this is a thing that I could do. And then if they ever need to do it, and by need to, I mean they took a class in college and that just seemed like a useful thing, to get a low budget 3D printer that's capable will become very, very reasonable.
Right.
And once that's true, then whether everyone has one in their house or not is irrelevant because everyone can get one. And more importantly, they can get one that's quite useful even on their own to have if
Right.
they ever have a need for it. You know, I'm going to do this thing on Etsy or I'm going to print all these things out for a wedding or whatever else. And you're like $300 or $400. That might be very reasonable to say I can spend. Particularly, you know, with inflation in the last 3 years, $400 used to feel like a whole lot more money to me. And now I'm like, yeah, we go out to eat 6 times with the kids and bam, that's $400. Or I take my car in for anything ever and that's $1,000. I mean, I think the economics and the deflation that we see in technology is so radical compared to the rest of the economy that we forget that these things are practically free.
Right.
And becoming both cheaper literally and cheaper, you know, relatively.
Yeah. And, you know, I definitely think and have thought the barrier to entry is in no way cost for this. It's perception more than anything, but perception is driven by the software interfaces. Denise, when she was on the podcast, made a good point. There's also an element of like the community behavior, right? Like Cricut has this culture, right, of like crafty moms or crafty dads, and it's like very welcoming and opening and positive. 3D printing has some parts of the culture have become less friendly, you know, and kind of derogatory and stuff like that. But then it's also the software. It's as simple as the software, right? Like, do you have that Cricut experience? And I think we're getting there with the A1 and the A1 Mini, and Bamboo Studio is not something my mom or my dad would use, but they would use the smartphone app with Maker World.
Right. Yep.
Definitely.
And then you get to like the question, which sort of was actually one of the foundational questions of MatterHackers that still hasn't been explored after 12 years, which is how can you reasonably build custom apps for an individual trivially? Mm-hmm. And, you know, we had some ideas for solutions to that way back then. And I think some of those solutions remain pretty viable and are things that I would love to explore in the future, which are most people do not have nor want to get the capability of being able to design intricate things.
Yes.
But they do want to have them, and they would like them to function in their context. Whether their context means they fit in my car correctly, mm-hmm. or whether their context means they have the names of the bride and the groom on them. People want things that are contextually appropriate for their situation. And right. I do think that that can really be enabled, and I still expect to see that eventually.
And I think when I think of like, what is my mom? And I say my mom, not because of gender, but because my mom is a lifelong crafter, and she knits and she sews and she scrapbooks. She does all the crafting except 3D printing. And when I think of like, what would she 3D print? It really is two categories. One of them is stuff she finds cute or cutesy or necessary, like ready-made stuff. I mean, like, you know, she'll have me 3D print her like any old tool caddy. It doesn't need to be personalized or customized, as you said. Like someone else made a sewing tool caddy. Can you print it for me? or something she would find cute for her grandkids, ready-made models, or specifically this damn thing on the refrigerator broke and, they don't carry it anymore. And if she could just download that model directly from Bosch.
Yep.
And that's kind of like the big promise people have always made, right? Like you're just going to pay $2 to download the STL. And Bosch, so I used to do luxury BMW parts. BMW has to stock a plastic part after they make a car for 35 years.
Yep.
Just imagine the logistics. They refresh the cars, a major refresh every 7 years, and a minor one after 5. Okay, so in 35 years, that's 7 different refreshes. Now you have the 2-door, 4-door.
Of every car.
Of 8 cars, right? And each one has 200, different SKUs of plastic parts just in the engine bay. You very quickly get to tens of millions of parts. Then you have right-hand drive, left-hand drive, And imagine if all that goes away, how much the cost, because you're paying for that, right? Like that cost is baked in. That's why your headlight costs $3,000 to replace.
Yep.
You're paying for the 100 of them that are going to sit there for 35 years. And imagine if that goes away. If now that little trim piece for the headlight, I just print it. Yeah.
Well, I absolutely think that is a fundamental shift that can happen and certainly should and probably will. It's hard to commit to it because it feels like it could have happened already and it hasn't. But I would say the one thing, and this is kind of controversial, I've had some pretty significant debates about it, that I think holds 3D printing back from being Cricut, from being consumer, from being my dad or my mom or my wife is, and this just, like I said, I don't think it's going to land with a lot of people, but I think it's fundamental, which is having a printer that can actually be effective at multi-material and multicolor printing.
Really?
There is, as I look around this room, there is not a single thing in this room that doesn't have multicolors in it. And text is the most important human thing that happens ever. And if I can't put text on my objects or art on my objects, they're just plastic crap. That's not
that is a controversial take.
If they have intrinsic utility, then that intrinsic utility exists. If they're a wheel or they're a component inside my dishwasher or they're a picture hanger, they don't need color. But if they're going to be aesthetic anywhere in my environment ever, they need to have at minimum 2 colors, which is the majority of things that we
You make a fair point. Like all the prints that I'm proudly displaying in front of me, they're multicolor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, like I did this on a $299 combo. Like insanity.
It's insane. Yeah.
Insanity.
And, but if you had the efficiency that we're seeing in some of these new machines like the Bamboo at multicolor, like if it was reaching up and grabbing an extruder that's already primed and heated and it continues to deliver my entire print in an hour and a half, 2 color, 3 color, 4 color, instead of, the purge and retract and the whole thing, I think that printer would become radically available to people to create things that they want. Whereas right now, you can make a Raspberry Pi case, but you don't make a Raspberry Pi case that you want to show anybody. You make a Raspberry Pi case that'll hold your Raspberry Pi. And if you want to burn a whole bunch of filament on purging and you want to wait 24 hours, then you get a Raspberry Pi case that you and I keep on our desk. I have also a bunch of multicolored things sitting on my desk.
Yeah.
But I don't have any single color things. That's not true. I have like 1 single color thing sitting on my desk.
That you're like really proud
but
of.
But they're not the things I show off. The things I show off, had a purge bucket worth of material.
The more I think about it, the more it's true because, and I think, you come from a filament background, like people have tried to square this round peg with like galaxy black filament, color change filament, gradient filament, and rainbow and silk. It's still not the same. There is still some element of it's kind of plastic crap. Again, for display stuff, if it's not functional.
But when you get display stuff like that Spider-Man that you just held up, that thing's gorgeous. I mean, that totally does the job.
Unbelievable.
And you could say, does it have the fit and finish of some injection molded part or some other thing? Questionable, but you holding it up in this monitor, I can see no difference between that.
I was thinking the other day, I don't fully understand. I think injection molding, they'd have to like blast paint it, wouldn't they? Like
you couldn't.
You can't
That'd have to
injection
be
mold
painted or
this.
dipped or some other kind of post
Right.
process
Right. So
or
the fact that,
assembled.
the fact that my kid can scratch this around on the floor and it's
Incredible, yeah.
millimeters deep, it's still got that. It's pretty cool.
The
So what
color
do you
came
think
off
of?
of my switch to turn left and right on my car, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, why isn't this embedded? Why isn't there an
Right.
actual plastic change here so that I
Right.
could rub it for 2 years and it wouldn't come off?"
Yeah, I gotta watch one of these, like how it's made on kids' action figures, because they've got so many different colors on there. I don't understand how they do that with injection molding. Like
Yeah.
how does Barbie get her pigment and
Well, part of it's painted.
right,
I mean, her lips and her eyes are post painted or,
right,
machine painted, but they're not in the plastic.
which adds so much cost to actually have something painting it.
Yeah.
Huh. So what do you think then of the Prusa XL direction, tool changers? Because that's the only way,
Uh,
right?
I think it is. I mean, it's really interesting. Someone asked me what I thought would be the next thing in SLA printing a few years ago. And I think SLA, when you get multi-material, and if you had support material, basically, if you get something that's like an object, which was, it's like got dot matrix heads inside of it and it's
Mm-hmm.
squirting out the material and it can print 4 or 5 colors at the same time or materials at the same time.
Right.
And to me, that could just be unbelievably game changing if that technology were to kind of get into the consumer space in a compelling way. And there were lots of patents around it. I think some of those patents just expired a couple of years ago. But in the same way that FDM and FFF got really popular after the patents expired, that's the whole rep movement.
Right.
There is this opportunity in SLA, the photo curing resins materials, if they are deposited, to print unbelievably high resolution multi-material components.
Oh
That
yeah,
would
some
just
of the stuff I did
be
a YouTube
incredible.
short about it, like these HP printers that cost 70 grand to start with one color, but they literally it's like your photo printer, but it's doing 5 micron layers in
We
any
sell a
color.
Japanese printer called the Mosaic. Is
Yeah.
it called the
Okay.
Mosaic? And it's unbelievable. Like it can print actual pure clear, and it prints in 2D printing ink. It doesn't print in any 3D ink at all. It literally prints ink, and it is just unbelievable.
What is that? What does that cost? Just curious.
I think it is. I think the cheapest machine is $30,000.
Oh, that's not even that bad.
Yeah,
That's not
and
that much more than a Prusa XL. I'm just kidding.
it's just incredible. Well, it's very expensive, but I could imagine these technologies really coming into
Right.
being cheap in the way that these other devices have become cheap. I mean, if you go back to the early days of our industry, back at the RepRap days, the cheapest 3D printer that you could buy that did material extrusion that we now can buy for $300 cost $45,000.
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, that was the cheapest one. So
Like a
when we say that
Stratasys
this
kind
printer,
of, yeah.
yeah, when you're saying this printer costs $30,000 right now, the actual technologies that are sitting inside of it are the technologies that are in a 2D printer that costs $200.
Right. Right.
So
That trickle down.
yeah, you can
Um,
imagine that technology deflation hitting that space
yeah.
and just getting some really, really incredibly capable devices.
I
And then it becomes
wonder.
about designs and technology and customization and personalization.
So let me ask you this then, and let me know if you have to go because I know we're coming up on time. By the way, MatterHackers said it's called the Mimaki, the Japanese printer you were talking about.
Mamaki.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad
Yeah.
someone helped me out with that.
Someone on the
The
team
Mosaic
said
is
that.
that palette switching thing that has materials
Yes.
coming into it.
So I wonder, it sounds like you feel, I don't want to get controversial here, but I'm really excited about tool changers. But it sounds
Yep.
like you feel like it's a half measure on the way to something revolutionary.
I think it is the way to do it in FDM printing. And I think FDM printing has some really, really compelling, very, very difficult to unseat advantages. The fact that it's low VOC and that you can take the print off the bed after it's completed and have it is unimaginable. And so for me, yeah, I think the tool changers will forever have a life and a very appropriate place.
Yeah.
Because there's no post-processing. And these other technologies will all require some level of post-processing, more significant than peeling off, support material.
Right. And if it's not post-processing, it's, you need these big machines just to deal with the fact that you're doing laser sintering or these cartridges. Like you can't just monitor your
The
print in real
powders are
time and
also
watch
all
it.
single material, single color.
Yeah.
So they, again, only become really effective at functional parts.
Right.
And you can spray color into them. I mean, that has certainly happened, and it does create some very, very good stuff and very interesting stuff. So uh, people are innovative and they can find their ways around all kinds of technical problems. But I still think the thing that 3D printing needs is multi-material and multicolor
Yeah.
to be aesthetically useful, which is the majority of what people really have in their lives are aesthetics.
Right.
I mean,
Even
how
if
many
it's a
functional things do you
functional
actually
part,
need?
as you said, like a Raspberry Pi case, or, I'm fixing something on my car. I still want, as you said, the turn signal indicator needs to be on there. I don't want to hand paint it on.
Now that bamboo can reliably, cut the filament, pull it back, and push in a new one, there are so many gorgeous pieces around this office
Yeah.
of things that people were willing to waste lots of filament to get what they wanted. Settlers of Catan, there are hundreds of tiles for that game all over the place that people have printed that have little trees with little, little trunks and grass and snow on the ground, and they just look great.
Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed, but everyone, as you said, has responded to the X1 Carbon in terms of speed, print quality, all this other stuff. Nobody, except for Anchor, and it hasn't come out with, nobody has responded to the multicolor thing. And I don't know, I don't think it's because they can't. I think it's because maybe people are underestimating the value of it, or they haven't figured out a way to do it better. But it is interesting to me. I would have expected to see more answers. I would have expected to see Creality do something,
Well, anybody who can do multi-material and multicolor, if you look at the prints that they show off and that they show for their printer, they're always multicolor.
Yeah. Yeah. Prusa, to name one.
Yeah.
But that's it, right?
Yeah.
Like, who else is doing, not Mosaic, or there's that Turkish company that now has multiple, a kit. There's 3D Chameleon, but I'm talking about integrated solution of like, this runs on our printer. No, why is nobody even trying? It's crazy to me.
Yeah. I always think of the software stack, and these are really hard problems.
I mean, yeah, but you got Orca Slicer now. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but so many manufacturers are now recommending Orca Slicer. Like, I think
I just think like the hardware software integration of the machine itself to actually have it be capable of calibrating two nozzles and having them aligned and keep them maintained. I mean, it is, you literally multiplied the whole thing by another dimension, right? Another power of 10.
Right. Well, you heard what Max Zolim of the Voron team said about the Phoenix. It's like the printer that almost broke him and his marriage, just trying to get basically a scaled up 2.4 to be IDEX. Like the size was easy. The IDEX is what took 3 years, and it's still not perfect.
And not to mention, the second extruder is very, very, very difficult to calibrate from a software, firmware, hardware perspective.
Yeah.
How do you even measure the position of the tip of that nozzle? Which, again, a brilliant move on Bamboo's part to say, we're going to skip that. The nozzle's the nozzle. Right. And, we might have some bleed, and we might have to waste a lot of filament, and we have to cut it because you can't pull it back reliably. And they're dealing with all of these problems by saying, how can we circumvent the problem?
Right.
Which is fantastic because it works, but it's non-optimal.
Right. But if you sell filament and you have a filament membership, it's not the worst thing in the world from a business perspective.
No, from a business perspective, you can burn a lot of filament.
Bingo.
And the machine already prints so fast that it uses more filament than any machine ever.
Yeah, true. That is true. Well, Lars, I know we're coming up on time here. I'm going to check real quick and give people an opportunity to ask any last-minute questions.
Love questions.
I'll ask you my kind of litany of rapid-fire questions that I always ask as we wrap up. And folks in the live audience, if you have any questions before we let Lars go. My first one, I think I know the answer is almost always the same. But what is your favorite printer? The one that you love the most? And what is the printer that if you just need something now that you turn to?
Truly, my favorite printer would be the printer that we built, which would be a Pulse, and it would be the IDEX. We didn't build an IDEX version, but we did make a switching extruder version.
Okay.
And we never got it all the way polished, but I did love it, and I have a bunch of prints on my desk that it made. But the reason I loved it, and this is just purely selfish, is that I could modify it.
Yeah.
I could make it behave. I controlled the software, and it was fantastic. So I feel like that's kind of a cheat answer, but that would be the truth. That was my favorite printer that I ever had. If I was just going to get something made, we have a print farm here. And so I can just put stuff into that print farm, and it's mostly bamboo Carbon X1s.
Mm-hmm.
But we have over 50 printers in our print farm. And so my favorite printer to get something done is I can get anything done.
Just
I can point the ion cannon at whatever I want, and it'll crush out.
Pause the winding down. We didn't talk at all about print farm. What are you guys printing as a print farm? Is it products for your
so
customers?
We have both prints on our site, and we are actively looking for designers to bring prints that we can both sell their digital design, but more importantly their printed design, and ship it out to customers for them.
No kidding.
As well as we do a lot of custom printing. So the farm started out as custom print jobs, but we've been doing more and more aesthetic printing. So we have a contract with this guy to print starships.
Cool.
And so this is a 3D printed design that you can buy on our website. So you probably saw this thing. It's friggin' amazing.
Yeah.
So that's a design you can buy on our website, and we'll print it for you and send it out to you.
Just awesome.
But there's just so many designers that like Clock Spring is just an example that comes to mind of designers that I would love to have their designs available for purchase printed.
Yeah. That's surprising to me, because by definition, customers, your basic customer base is people who have a printer or want a printer. But you're saying you have another total different demographic of people who just want to buy printed parts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we also, that to me is a super exciting business model. It's still kind of nascent. We've only been doing it for about a year, but it's grown a lot this last year. And the other thing that we do a lot of is service. So we do training and service, which is a huge part of our company.
Okay. And then I'll ask you a wrap-up question, though I think I need to reach out to you because I have all these models that I designed, like little pieces of artwork and stuff that I sold on Etsy, but the shipping was a nightmare from Israel. So maybe I'll upload the models to you guys.
We're good at shipping.
Oh, I can imagine. I can only imagine. What's the last thing you printed for yourself?
We purchased a design at the very beginning of the company, in the first year of the company, and it was just an aesthetic. It's like a robot spider.
Okay.
It's been sitting around in our archives for 12 years. And I was like, that thing from 11 years ago, let's see if we could put it up on the website. So I printed that out last week, and it looks really cool. It's not designed well for 3D printing at all, but it succeeded in the farm way better than I expected. Cool. And I think that's the last thing that I printed.
Very cool.
Oh, and I was also printing a trophy yesterday. So I want... we write all our own software stack, so I'm very interested in making designs that can be customized on our website. And you see a preview on our website, and then you can actually order the customized design, and we'll print it and deliver it. So I was printing prototypes of that tool and that system yesterday.
That's cool. So I like to give our guests a call to action of like, how can we support you? Knowing that most of our audience probably already buys from you is a good call to action. Hey guys, upload your designs to MatterHackers so you can make money off your 3D prints.
We don't have a digital store like that. You can't just upload things to our store. You would have to, if you are or know an established designer who would like to sell their parts in our store printed, you should let them know that that's a service that we provide and that we would love to work with them.
Cool. Does it connect to Etsy?
We can connect to Etsy. Yeah.
Very
you could
cool.
You could send us the designs and we'll fulfill the order.
Very, very cool. Okay.
And I'd have to say, that's not fully baked. So
Sure.
You'd have to have a pretty interesting story for us to do a little bit of work there, but I'd be very interested in it.
Very cool. Well, awesome. So then a good call to action is, guys, make sure to check out MatterHackers. I learned in this video many things, but I also learned that you guys have a 3% loyalty program. So really, really cool. And we have a link. If you guys want to support this channel, we have a link for MatterHackers. I don't think we do a whole lot of traffic, but we should start. And Lars, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciated chatting.
Absolutely. And my call to action would be to say that someone asked you about sub $15 materials.
Yes.
And I'd say be really careful.
Okay.
Materials they like in the old days, I was saying they used to just fall apart and crack and break. Cheap materials are cheap. Some of them are good. You might get lucky, but MH Build, if you buy it in bulk, is very cheap and very good.
And then you said that there's a new line that you guys have come out with.
Thrifty make.
Thrifty. What does that go for a kilo?
I think our single unit price is about $16, $15.
That's amazing. That's really, really good.
And we intentionally said that this material is budget. That's why we called it thrifty. So it still is performant. We still test it, but it's not as good as our other materials. Yeah. So it is designed to be functional and effective, but cheap.
Right. If someone's number one criteria is saving money, they can know that for $3 more over the $13 PLA, they at least get something that performs.
Yep.
I actually want to do a video. I have an idea for a video, which is like, because I did, your basic filaments, your advanced and carbon filaments. Then I did your weird and esoteric filaments. And those videos, people love them. So I think the next one in the series is going to be, I tried the cheapest filaments out there, like the $13 ABS on Amazon, and just see like what happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you should. It would be a really fun experiment for you to do as well, because I assure you some of them are good and some of them are amazingly unprintable.
Right. I once needed, and we're totally out in the weeds now, but I once needed to hit a certain threshold to get free shipping on Amazon. So I got this like $12 250 gram spool of nylon, and it was so bad. Nylon normally doesn't stick, right? This nylon was so messed up and so bad, it stripped the engineering plate, not a normal plate, stripped the engineering plate off my X1 carbon. That bad.
Oh my God.
Horrible.
That's amazing.
Horrible. Anyway, Lars, thank you so much for your time. I hope we keep in touch, and I look forward to just seeing all the cool stuff you guys have coming out.
Yeah, send me some of your designs and we'll look at them.
Awesome. All right, my friend. Take care, and thanks again.
Great to meet you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infill Podcast. For show notes or links to anything mentioned in today's episode, visit thenextlayer.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you're listening, or click the like button to let us know. And consider subscribing to The Next Layer on YouTube so you can tune in live and participate in the next conversation. We'll see you on The Next Layer.